Hey everybody, Mr. Marie here, Fix It Friday number 7. Today I'm going to install a new brake controller into my pickup truck. So, on the back of my pickup truck there is a receiver for a hitch, and that is what we use to pull a trailer with. Whether it be a box trailer, a dump trailer, a boat trailer, a camper, something like that. Those types of trailers have a brake system to help slow you down. If I just depended on the truck brakes, it probably wouldn't be enough to stop it. So they add 1 or 2 axles to the trailer, sometimes 3 axles, and add brakes to those. What makes the brakes engage? That's what the brake controller does. So let me show you the parts real quick of the system, and we will tear into this project here. So here's a couple important parts of the system. This here is my receiver. Okay, and that is attached to the frame of the pickup truck. This here is my tow ball or my hitch, and that is what we put the tongue of the trailer on. Notice it's not pinned. There's normally a pin that goes through here to lock it in. I just put it in there for representative purposes. This here is our wiring connector. This is where we hook the connector from the trailer, and if you look inside of there, there's a bunch of connections, and those are for brakes, turn signals, reverse lights, and your trailer brakes. Now let's look inside the truck and see what parts we have for that. So this here is the non-working brake controller. The way this works, the way it should work, when I turn my vehicle on, right now there's no power to it, and what we should have when we press, sorry about that. When we press the brake pedal, that light should come on. There's a little bulb right here that tells you there's power going to the connector on the back of the truck. Okay, so if I press the brake pedal, I have nothing right now. The brake lights of the truck come on, but I'm not getting a red light on there. Okay, now there's also a brake check. When I push this lever, that will engage the trailer brakes if a trailer is connected to this. That function does work, but as I'm driving, there is no controller for the brake. I should be able to apply the brakes. I should be able to adjust this controller for the tightness of the brakes, how hard the brakes apply, and then also how fast the brakes apply. So I have nothing like that now. So the last time I pulled a trailer, put a pretty large strain on the pickup truck brakes, and it wasn't very good. So we're going to replace this thing and go from there. So the first thing I'm going to do, there are 2 screws on the side of the unit. You can kind of see right where those are. I'm going to take that screw out, and same on the other side. So I'll drop it out of the bracket, and then there's a wiring connection. The previous guy butchered it. It's a total disaster underneath there. I'll show you what that looks like. We're going to pull that whole mess out of there, clean it up, and do it the right way. So I'm going to get the camera set up here, and we will start to rip this thing apart. Okay, so we'll take these 2 screws out first, and I'm just going to use a pair of pliers because the fasteners are actually in poor condition, and I don't even think, it's like they stripped them out when they put them in. They didn't use the correct tools the first time. So see if I can get a screwdriver on this. This is a universal screwdriver. I don't know if you just saw me do that. I can flip from one side to the other. So right now these are both flatheads, but I can take and flip these. There's a bit in each side. There's our Phillips. There's a smaller Phillips. And these are convenient for a job like this. If you want to drag the whole tool shed out to the truck, I can take a look and see what I have here. So there we go. That one's coming out pretty nice. Take our other screw out. Oops, sounds like the UPS guys out there. Hear the horn beeping. Okay, that screw, so this pops out. And if you see this big bunch of wires right here, I don't know what kind of connectors they use, but that's embarrassing. You don't do work like that. So we're gonna, like I said, clean this up. Now, some of these have a plug on the back, which my new one has. Any brake controllers here, dig it out for you. You can actually buy the harness that plugs into the pickup truck. Okay, so there's a matching end to this. So we'll plug into the new one and plug into the pickup truck. So rather than do that, I'm just going to cut this off, splice the wires in, and we'll keep it nice and neat. Okay, so this is actually the factory harness right here. So they already spliced into it. There is a plug connection underneath the truck. I'll lower the camera so you can see it, but we will, if we don't get hit by the UPS truck here, we'll show you how to unhook that harness and then move forward there. Okay, God bless General Motors. They left all this wiring hanging under here, whether it was that or the previous guy, which I think that's who it was. Kind of left me a mess here. Behind this fuse panel, circuit breakers, we're going to screw this nut, take this cover off, and we're going to trace our plug back. So plug goes into here. There's a small tab on it. We'll push down and pull and disconnect. And that's what our factory harness looks like. That's where it plugs in. So we're going to take and fish it out of here. Actually, it's not going to fish very nice because they went through a bunch of stuff. I'm going to take a pair of wire cutters. Maybe I can get it. Might be able to get it without cutting it. Let's see here. Sometimes people don't think when they do this stuff, they route whatever's convenient, not the neatest way. So we're going to clean this thing up before we go to reinstall it. I'm a kind of a stickler for that stuff. There we go. I don't mess around. Okay, so let's, we're going to head inside here with this whole mess. We're going to wire it nice and neat in the basement, and then we'll move from there. So, like I said, there's my controller. There's this big mess of connection, and this big long wire here. So we're gonna slim that down a little bit and hook this up correctly. So one of the things we want to do is verify with the directions that our wiring is matching what the factory vehicle has. So I look at my wiring diagram, it tells me what we have here. So it says the black wire is the vehicle power, red is the stoplight, that's going to go to my brake switch, white is the vehicle ground, which you have to have, that'll be like our negative, and the blue is the trailer brakes. So that blue wire is going to go from the front of the pickup truck all the way to the rear to that connector that's back next to the receiver. Okay, so I basically read through these. We're going to reconnect those 4 wires. Now, I did show you this mess here. I'm going to cut this open and show you what that looks like, and probably what not to do. So first, we're going to cut this electrical tape off of here, just to see what kind of mess the last guy left for us. It looks like it was a slick and quick job, which we're not a big fan of. We want to do stuff the right way. So here's a bunch of electrical tape goobered over top of this thing. See if we can get it to unravel here. Yeah, this is a mess. As I always tell you guys, there's something about having pride in your work. This guy here, looks like he took crimp connectors and just went crazy with the electrical tape after the fact. Probably not the best way to do this. Yeah, in fact, sometimes people don't even hit these crimp connectors. And actually, this isn't even the right size crimp connector. These are colored. There are blue, yellow, red, and each one of those colors correlates with the size of wire that is used. So if you're not using the correct connector for the correct wire, you can also have some connectivity issues there. And I think that's probably what part of the issue is with this one. And it's pretty old. It's 11 of 02, so it's a 2002 brake controller on a 2004 pickup truck. So who knows what he came up with for that. Maybe it came off of his old truck or something like that. So I'm not going to mess with this anymore. I'm going to cut it off. I'm not going to waste your time watching this. A couple different types of tools you can use: diagonal cutters, wire cutters. Here's just a pair of wire strippers that we'll use here later on. Just going to grab a pair of diagonal cutters here. Or actually, these lineman pliers will work. I'm going to cut this entire end off of here. We'll try and cut it all at once. Okay, nice clean cut, all the same lengths. And the old brake controller, like I said, we'll toss that. Now, we're going to take and strip these wires. Okay, now these are different diameters, and usually it's marked. This looks like it's about, this is 12 gauge wire on the black. On the red, it's probably, I would think about 16 gauge. The white one's a 16 gauge, and my other blue one here is also a 12. So we're going to do this the correct way. So first, we're going to take and strip this down. Now these strippers tell us, if you can read that, if it'll zoom, the gauge of the wire that we can cut with these. So I'm just going to go right to the 12 gauge connector, or the 12 gauge hole, and that's the size wire we're going to cut. Okay. I'm not going to use an undersized one. If I use an undersized one, more than likely it's going to start to cut away at the wire. And that's no good. We don't want to do that. So we're going to strip roughly 5/8 of an inch of wire on this. And for the type of splice we'll do here, you'll see why in just a minute. So there's those. And we'll get our next two. We said these ones here were 16 gauge. So let's go right to our 16. And we'll strip it. Okay. This takes the work right out of it. It makes it simple. It's nice and clean cut. We're not playing around here. Some people try to do this with a utility knife. Just get a nice pair of wire strippers and be done with it. Some people also use a pair of diagonal cutters. We'll try and do this also. Okay. I'm going to take now just, this is called stranded wire, and we're going to twist the ends on it. So if you look at the wire, these are all small individual strands. We're going to take and tie those, or twist those for our connection. Okay. If you don't want to use your hands or your fingers, you could use a pair of pliers, a pair of lineman pliers would work. You can take and twist it, but this wire is relatively thin. You don't have to get crazy with it. Okay, so that is the truck and our plug end. The next thing we want to do is go to our controller end. So we're going to take, I might be able to take the connector apart, but there's plenty of extra length on the wiring here, so we don't necessarily have to do it like that. I'm going to take and cut these off, cut this connector off rather, and we'll splice this in. So I'm just going to take my diagonal cutters, brand new brake controller, 60 bucks. Bam, we're going to ruin it right now. Oh, there it is. Okay, so sometimes don't have the fear, just got to do it. Okay, so we're going to strip this one here just the same. So we said we had a 12 gauge wire connection there, and we're going to do about the same length as what we did on the other wires. And we said 16 was our other wire size. We got these two, have our 16s. And just as we previously did with our stranded wire, we will take and twist this. Okay, so our ends are together. Okay, simple twist. Actually, the thicker wire is a little harder to turn on this one, so we'll show you what it looks like with a pair of linesman pliers. We're going to grab and twist. Sometimes the end might get a little, might get some frays on the end, which is okay. You can take it, cut those off if you have to. Okay, so those are complete. Our harness end is complete. Okay, folks, just to go through some of the different connection types. Originally, I planned on soldering this together. In that case, just like we soldered those copper pipes when I did my plumbing job here on the ice maker, I would need to use a soldering gun. It's my heat source. I'd previously used a torch for the pipe because it's much larger. So what I would do is I'd heat the wire up with my soldering gun. I would apply flux to the wire, and then I would use solder to connect those wires. If the connection was outside the truck, I would probably do that just to make sure it's a very solid connection, and I would put a heat shrink over top of it or something like that. The other option we can do for this is use wire connectors. So the type of connectors we're going to use are similar to what the gentleman had on the truck previously, but we're going to put the correct size connectors on. So we're going to use blue connectors for our smaller wires, for our 16 gauges, and we're going to use the yellow connectors for our larger connections, and that's going to be much safer than previously what he had on there. These are somewhat permanent. They're one-time use. I cannot remove the connectors. I can't take those apart. So once I set the connectors, you're pretty much out of luck. Now, if I was going to plan on taking this brake controller out of this truck, let's say I decide to sell it and buy something else, I can use a blade style connector, and it looks like this. So this would be the male side of the blade, and this would be the female side, and I would take the male end, slide it in to the female end, and then that connection is made. Okay, those fit very snug and they fit very tight. Now the only problem with these is that is all exposed, so we want to close that up or not have exposed metal. If this connector was to touch the next connector, it would spark, we would see a light show, and there would be problems there, so that's not something we want to do. Okay, now they do make these connectors where you can use them in exterior applications. They have a heat shrink on the outside. You have to heat it up with a heat gun or something like that, or a lighter, butane lighter, and that will seal the connections. Okay, but we're just going to use our crimp connectors again. They'll work well for this interior application. Notice this looks like a barbell. It has a little bit of a raised side on it. We're going to slide our connector in, and right where the smaller portion is, that is where the insulation of the wire is going to sit. I'm now going to take my wire pliers here, and there are crimp connector markings on here, if you can see those. So these are blue crimp connectors. We're going to put on a blue mark, and for right now we're just going to do one squeeze on the crimp. Okay, and we're going to put all the crimp ends on the controller end first. So let's slide these over, and we will crimp these guys. Okay, and we'll put a couple more crimps in here later once we get the other side on. We just don't want to put too much, we don't want to crimp them too much, because then they're, like I said, these are one-time use. We cannot get these back off once we set them. So we'll do our larger crimps next. Okay. These also work well for, I've installed quite a few car stereos over the years. These work well. I like to buy the better quality ones for doing car audio stuff. And that way there's no resistance. You won't have any change in the sound. So we have our wiring in now. We're going to take and now marry these together. So we'll start with this big blue guy first. Now this is tricky because you need almost a third hand for this operation. We need to hold these together. We also need to take our wiring pliers, slide those over top, and prepare to crimp that. So I like to make sure everything's lined up. Okay, we're going to squeeze first. Okay, our blue wires are married together. If you notice, there's no indentation in the center. I'm going to take my pliers, put those back over the top, and give this a couple more squeezes just to make sure everything is crimped together tightly in the center. Okay, so I'm going to give a little pull on that connection, and that's tight. There's nothing loose there. Okay, we'll do our black wire next. These larger wires, sometimes with the heavier diameter, you kind of fight them a little bit, and they become difficult to set. So we'll do the hardest one next. We'll have two easy ones here for the end. So make sure we're snug, give that a squeeze, and just like we did, we're going to work down the line, crimp that the rest of the way. Okay, now I like to give a pull on each one as I finish it, just to make sure we're in good shape there. Okay, next we'll do our white wire. Slide this in. Sometimes they get a little unhappy going in. You have to kind of duck down and look and see what you have there. So let's put our connector through again. Okay, make sure our wire's in, give it a nice squeeze. Okay, and we'll work down the line. And lastly, our red wire. Make sure his wires are twisted before you set this inside your connector. Okay. Slide our tool back over. Make sure we're in. And once again, squeeze and go all the way down the line. Okay. Now, these connections are complete. Because this is interior, really, I could let those connections sit like that. Okay, but I think it looks very sloppy. I'm going to take and put just a little bit of electrical tape around these just to keep those grouped together. Okay, we're not going to do it sloppy. We're going to do it nice and neat. We're not going to put 30 feet of electrical tape on here. We're just going to do a little bit of tape on there. So we'll do just a couple wraps on each wire. Now I'm going to pre-cut the tape before I go to do this, because I need to try and work the tape in between all these wires here. So rather than fight with it, we're just going to cut a couple inches off for each one. It's not going to take many wraps because our wires are already covered. But we will put a piece of tape on there. Go just a little bit of an angle, and that way as we work down the connector, it's entirely sealed up. Okay, so that's what that looks like. Okay, nice and neat. I'm going to do the other three, and we'll see you back here in just a minute. Okay, we have our crimp connector set, and what we're going to do is just to tie these together. We could probably use a small zip tie or something like that. I'm going to use electrical tape just to go over these one more time. Now, the previous guy had the wrong size connectors. There was loose connectors, and it was a very sloppy job in regards to the connection. So I'd have to say that's probably what part of the problem was. If it was a controller issue or if it was just a wiring issue. So, like I said, we're going to make this nice and neat, and that when we got to put it in the truck, A, it looks good, B, it's also functional. So we have that wrapped. Okay, we'll cut our tape, and there is our nice clean connection in the center. Okay, I'm going to red up some zip ties. I'm going to find a couple other things, and we are going to go out to the truck. I'm probably going to have to drill a new hole or use a power drill to run a couple of the new screws in. So I have to round a few tools up. We'll get that stuff. We will mount the controller first, then we will run the wiring, plug it in, and we should be good to go from there. Okay, see you in just a minute. Okay, folks, so first thing we have to do is mount our new bracket. There's a major size difference between the two. Here's our new bracket. Here's our old bracket. So we're going to address that first. And we're going to try and use the existing holes, the existing area where it was located at, rather than make Swiss cheese out of the pickup truck here. So okay, and we'll put 2 screws in that. We wouldn't put one. We're going to make sure that our controller's secure. We don't want that bouncing around everywhere. So let's run a second screw here, and okay, got that. Next we're going to mount our controller itself. So it's actually the same exact screws as we used for that, same diameter and everything. So we'll set those up in the battery drill. And there's 2 different holes on here in regards to where to mount it at. So we're going to have to kind of eyeball it here, see what's going to fit the best. I'm probably going to leave it low so that I could use the options on the brake control. So I can flip it down like so. These are little plastic screws, or little metal screws going into plastic. You don't have to over tighten these or go too crazy with them. So we'll get this snugged up first. And I'll come over the other side, do the same exact thing. Pardon the reach here. So that's done, and next we have to do our connection up underneath. So let's get it down low here. And first I'm going to hook up our connection underneath, and then I will worry about tying up the wires and doing all that kind of work. So let's run a couple of zip ties so we can keep it neat and organized. So let me get this in the fuse block first. Oh, sorry about that. And that's there. Okay, our connector's in. And we'll also put the face of our fuse box on. We don't want to leave anything exposed here, hanging out to get kicked or tripped on or anything of the sort there. Tighten this up. Okay, and lastly, we will clean this wiring up so it's not hanging loose. I think we have just enough room here. Yeah, we'll keep it up nice and high. We wouldn't want this to get caught under by the accelerator pedal or something like that. So we're going to keep it high. And we use a couple of zip ties here. We can find our end. There we go. Pull our slack out. Okay, put one tie here. Have a tie on the opposite side we'll place. You're not going to be able to see this one because it's kind of buried up in here, but it'll be a good connection. Okay, so those are good. Last thing we're going to do, we'll cut the end of our zip ties off. We're not going to leave all the slack here. Okay folks, the last thing to check here is to see if the unit actually works. So put our key in and turn, and what we should have when we press the brake pedal, we should have a red light. Sorry about that. Okay, ignition's on. When we press the brake pedal, there should be a red light that comes on the unit. Oh, there it is. Okay, so our controller's hooked up, our controller works. Previously, the other controller, we saw that the red light didn't come on when we pressed the brake pedal. So, mission accomplished. We are ready to pull trailers and have good braking here. So that'll help. Now, this will actually illuminate when I pull the lever. That's telling it's engaging the brakes. And then my other two things here, my sync and my gain, I will adjust those accordingly when I actually hook up to the trailer. It'll monitor the brakes, see the kind of brake system that's on it, the number of axles, and I can adjust how fast the brakes apply and how hard they apply. So Fix It Friday is a success. The brake controller's installed and we are good to go. Have a good Friday, folks.